Hey guys, what is up? This is Philbo, and we are looking at the lightning spinning dagger Thorn explosion build in Undecember. We will be utilizing spinning dagger in its return projectile form. So what this is going to do is make our spinning dagger extra large, and as we throw it, it will return back to us, doing damage in its path both ways. We will then be triggering to Thorn explosion, which is going to create an area of effect on the ground that has thorns that do damage, and after about a second finishes off with one very large thorn. So this build is going to do very, very good damage on single targets, and assuming you get a pretty good awakening with spinning dagger, you will be able to clear mobs pretty quickly. Not quite as fast as the awakening that gives the spinning dagger a multi-shot, but it doesn't do as much damage, so we will be doing the return projectile like we stated earlier. But do know that that is an option that we can awaken to get a better farming experience with spinning dagger. And the other thing I want to say about spinning dagger is that it sits in an odd place between melee and bow builds. So the dagger is thrown. It is a projectile, just like bow builds. You don't use the bow, so we don't get to use something like illusion arrow. Unlike melee, you will not be up close to enemies because you won't have certain link runes like grand approach or fighting spirit for extra survivability, so you won't be able to use illusion axes to its fullest potential. And since we can't really run illusion axes, and we absolutely can't run illusion arrow in this build, we are going to need to find a way to apply the shock debuff, because the shock debuff is just so strong. So that is why we will be converting to lightning in this build, and I'll talk a little bit about how we'll get that lightning debuff applied. It's going to be through the Zodiac tree that we get that ability. One other thing I want to say before we jump into the details is that I have a build playlist that is full of other builds that I've made, and you can find the link to that playlist in the description below. But enough of the details, let's go ahead and jump right into the build. All right, so the main ability in this build is going to be spinning dagger. Spinning dagger, you throw a dagger at enemies and it hits those enemies in its path like so. So using spinning dagger prior to awakening it is not the best. It does not have a very large area, and you're not going to be mowing through mobs by any means. So I don't know that I would use it prior to awakening. However, if you absolutely have to, you could use something like the chain rune. This is magic synthesis link rune, and that will allow your dagger to kind of bounce around from enemy to enemy. So use that if you have to prior to awakening. Otherwise, maybe use something else until you get spinning dagger awakened. But let's go ahead and move on. It starts off as physical damage, but remember, we are going to convert damage in this build to lightning to pick up the shock debuff. We're going to get some projectile damage. We're not going to get any benefit from armor pen with spinning dagger in this build since we are converting to lightning, so keep that in mind. Then we will also get projectile damage amplification, and our spinning dagger will get larger as we move up from normal to legendary. For awakenings, we are going to be going with Verity. That is going to give us this projectile return, and it's also going to boost the projectile size, so we're going to get a very, very large spinning dagger. When we throw it, it is going to hit all the enemies in its path, and then it's going to return and do damage. The damage that is returned when we awaken can potentially get down to 70% dampening. So if you get the best roll, which would be 70% here, then the return projectile is going to hit for 30% damage. So it's a really, really big boost in damage for that. And depending on whether you get the 70 versus 120, you know, whatever you're closer to, is going to be a big impact on the spinning dagger size. For my spinning dagger, I ended up getting virtually the smallest projectile size you can get, and about the worst projectile return damage you can get. So almost the worst dampening. 70 is the lowest on projectile size. And even still, I think this is fairly large. It seems to do a decent job of clearing. I've seen this at a much, much higher level from other players, and it gets a lot bigger. One more thing I got to say about the return projectile is that if you hit a wall with it, it does not return. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're attacking. You have to be in an open space for it to come back. Also, you can't move out of the way and it hit your enemy. Like if you move out the way, it's not going to hit it again. So keep that in mind when you are attacking. We will then be using Thorn Explosion. As we attack with our spinning dagger, Thorn Explosion will activate, and an area of thorns will appear, do damage in an interval with small thorns, and then finish off with one very large thorn. So every 0.3 seconds for 3 times, we're going to have the first thorn attack happen here. And then it's going to finish up with a very, very large second thorn attack, which does a lot of damage. We're then going to awaken to Source. Source is going to give us the most damage increase. We get 2 lines of damage amplification boost here. So this is the one to go with if you're looking for maximum damage. If you don't care about damage, you could go Origin. This will give you a big area of effect, amplification, and turn this one area to 3, which could potentially overlap, but it does remove that second projectile attack, this second Thorn attack, which is the really strong one. I'd rather just go with the damage here. I think Spinning Dagger does a pretty decent job of clearing anyway. We are then going to be using Marksman for our attack enhance. We get a boost to our hit rating and projectile damage amplification. Both of our skills have the projectile tag, so this is the attack enhance you want to use. For defense enhance, we're going to be using tenacious regeneration. You get a nice instant recovery of a portion of your health points, and then a big boost to your HP regen per second for the duration. So I like this one. It's kind of like having a second health potion on hand and works really well in tight situations. We're then going to be using roll for our movement skill. Very low cooldown and has 2 use counts by default, so I like roll a lot. And then I almost always put on a second movement ability. Since we're doing a lot of farming, having 2 of these movement skills is a really nice thing. So low cooldown here, lots of max use counts. This gets even more as we go up to the legendary and awaken it. But having 2 of these just helps you get around maps much faster and improves your clear speeds a lot, in my opinion. So that's why I take those 2 movement skills. And finally, I'm going to recommend that we run the Seal of Critical Chance to get a big boost to our critical rating until you've gotten to or very close to critical cap. Once you get close to 100% crit, then you're going to want to change out to something else. And what I would change to would be Seal of Condensed Elements. That is going to be the biggest increase to your damage after Seal of Critical Chance. All right, for the link runes on Spinning Dagger, we will be using Convert Lightning damage so that we can change Spinning Dagger from physical to lightning. We're doing this again so that we can apply the shock debuff, which is a huge boost to our damage. Then I use lightning penetration. This gives us a big boost to our penetration, which is very hard to come by. So getting it from this rune makes sense. I also like quick attack a lot. This is going to boost our attack speed significantly. My guess is you won't replace quick attack for a long time in this build until you get very, very high in investment. So stick with this one. This one is huge. We'll also be using element damage amplification to get a nice boost to our element damage amp. And then finally, I'm using Find Weakness to get a boost to our crit rate. Now, this is probably going to be the rune that you replace the soonest, but until you get to a crit cap, this is a very, very strong one. For some alternatives, you can use the chain rune here to get additional chain counts before awakening. So before you've awakened your Spinning Dagger, if you want to use it, use the chain rune. This is a magic synthesis rune. You get that off the alchemy table. I also really like Slaughter. Slaughter does a really good job early on when your crit damage is low. So this is basically a multiplier for your critical hits. You're not going to want to use this unless your crit rate is very high. It's not going to do much if your crit rate is like under 85% or something. So make sure your crit rate is high if you use Slaughter. And then once you've stacked enough crit damage, this starts to fall off, but is good early on. I also really like Confidence. If you ever decide to get rid of quick attack, Confidence is a good option. It provides a little bit less attack speed here, but it also gives a lot of damage if you have at least 80% or more HP. So this is a really good option if you're farming, because most of the time while we're farming, we are above 80% HP. So I like Confidence a lot. And then if you can handle it, Mana Storm is going to be a very, very strong option for the damage amplification. It does make your skill cost a ton of mana though, so keep that in mind. And then Harmony is a good option here. Harmony is good if you don't have a whole lot of HP absorb in your build. This one can give you HP absorb when your HP is lower than your mana. So I like Harmony a lot. It still adds some damage, so it's a good one. And if you're looking for something that will help you farm faster and help you move quicker, Winding Wind is also a good option here as it adds damage, but it gives you these stacks of Winding Wind up to 5 at the legendary level, and these boost your movement speed. So this is a nice option for farming. Moving on, we will be using spell activation on attack hit to link to our Thorn Explosion so that our Thorn Explosion activates when our Spinning Dagger hits the enemy. Strike is going to be the first link rune we look at here. Strike damage amplification boost. With strike damage, we get attack speed dampening. This doesn't affect us though because it's on our activated skill. So this is a very, very strong rune. We will also be using element damage amplification, just like on Spinning Dagger, since this is converted to lightning. So we get this element damage amp boost. I think lightning penetration is also a good option if you don't want to use element damage amplification here, but this one seems to do a really, really solid amount of damage. And then Mana Storm, I know we talked about this one earlier, but I like Mana Storm on Thorn Explosion almost always because it provides a lot of extra damage, and the cost of Thorn Explosion is very low. It's like one of the lowest mana cost spells in the game. So Mana Storm's always good on it, and you shouldn't have any problems with mana from this. We will definitely be converting to lightning damage so that both of our skills share lightning. This is going to help us make our shocks more frequent. Again, I'm going to talk about how we do that a little bit later. And then for the last rune, area effect. I like this one most of the time when I'm playing with Thorn Explosion because it does not have a large area of effect. So using the area of effect just helps with clearing a lot faster. And it also makes hits a little bit more consistent for enemies that are moving. Sometimes they'll start moving, and if your area of effect is a little bit larger, they will stay within the area of effect more frequently than if it's a small area. If you're looking for the absolute most damage, though, just take area effect off and put on concentrated area damage. This does the opposite of area of effect. It makes the area of Thorn Explosion smaller, but it does add quite a bit of damage amplification. For your Zodiac, what you're going to want to do is have enough dexterity for your spinning dagger, have enough strength for your Thorn Explosion, and then try and get to 200 intelligence. The reason you want 200 intelligence is so that you can pick up this 40% node right here. That requires you to have strength, dex, and int of 200 or more. While you're leveling up and before you get enough stats, don't worry about putting anything into intelligence. It's not needed, although having the extra mana is nice. Now I'm going to walk us through the Zodiac traits that I'm using. You don't have to use these exactly, but use this more so as a template just to get ideas. I'm grabbing these first 5 points right here with attack speed and damage upon attack. Since Spinning Dagger has the attack tag, that is why we go with this. Then we're also picking up all these points here in Explorer. We're grabbing armor. I think armor is more beneficial early on. At a certain point, you might transition to a heavy barrier build, but it takes a ton of investment before it gets good. So I focus on armor early on. When you're up close to armor cap, you can switch from armor and grab the dodge points instead. I'm then taking these first 3 points here to get this attack speed and HP. I'm grabbing a few points here just to get a boost to my mana potion effectiveness. These 5 points I'm grabbing, and again, I'm grabbing this 15% armor, and then take the resistance that you need the most. In tree 5, I'm taking all these points. I've been taking this a little bit more frequently lately for builds that have Thorn Explosion, because Thorn Explosion hits 4 times. And then in this build, we're going to be hitting a couple times with Spinning Dagger, once as it hits the enemy and then as it comes back through. So we're going to get a good bit of HP and mana on every single hit. So I like the sustainability of these 2 points here. Tree 6, I am taking all of these points to get this attack speed and this attack crit damage nodes, and all the other ones along the way are pretty good as well. Again, we're grabbing this 40% damage node in Maggot for tree 7. And I take these 3 points here in Deadly Poison. This is why we are converting to lightning. So we're converting to lightning so that we can apply shock. And let's go ahead and just read what shock does. Shock, chance to inflict shock to enemy. Shock increases the damage taken by enemies. This is a 20% damage increase. So it is huge. And the effectiveness is determined by strike damage dealt. So since we are doing good lightning damage, we will have a chance to shock. This +2 shock rate and this +1 debuff rate is actually going to only give us about 1.5% chance to shock, but we'll boost it a little bit further later on. I'm also grabbing all of these points here. I like grabbing these top 4 points just to make Thorn Explosion a little bit bigger with this area of effect. However, if you don't want that, you can take these out, put them elsewhere. And if you are struggling with mana, you could grab some extra points here in Dust. And then in tree 8, I'm going into Decay. I've been using a dagger and a shield for this build. However, you will get more damage from dual daggers. So if you want the maximum amount, definitely dual wield daggers, but make sure that both of your daggers are about the same in terms of damage. What happens with dual wield is that your stats are essentially determined by a combination of both of your daggers. So if one's garbage, you might actually end up doing less damage than if you just took that really bad dagger off and put a shield on. So it's a lot easier to get a really good shield and one really good weapon than it is to roll 2 really, really good weapons. I think dagger and shield is like a budget option, but it also adds so much survivability. So let me just show you real quick. My shield, it's nothing special. It has a lot of block expertise on it. This is what determines block. And if we go look at my defense here on the character sheet and just scroll down, you can see I have 38.1% block. Now, block can literally block anything. Area of effect, anything that can hit you, block can mitigate 100%. So this is different than dodge. If you look at the dodge mechanic, it's affected by the enemy's hit rating. So if the enemy has a really, really high hit rating, your dodge rate could actually be a lot lower than this number right here. Block is not like that. I really like that you get the block, and then you're also going to get things like armor and dodge if you have a hybrid piece here. And then if you're going to get one, try and get damage. And then it's also another piece that you can fill in resistances with. But again, if you want max damage, just go straight for dual wield. You would then drop these points in decay and put them into Leia here. I'm also grabbing these 5 points in Farmer for HP boost. I take these points here, get Time of the Hunt. 1.5% damage amp is really nice. I'm also getting this. I like movement speed increase, and then Detect Prey gives a chance to get 10% movement speed for 10 seconds. And then my final 3 points, I'm getting this lightning penetration. Now for our specialization, we are going to be going into Brilliance. This is usually the Casthor tree, but it gives such a big amount of damage. I usually end up running Brilliance on these attack-based builds that are converted to element because it ends up giving a ton of damage. So I like going with it. We're going to grab this acceleration, get attack speed and movement speed boost. Overpower is going to give us flat damage increase and some element penetration. We will come down, grab this strike damage amplification. And then the 2 routes you could go is you could grab up here, get some acceleration effect, and then this resource cost dampening if mana is not a big issue. This resource cost dampening is nice. You won't get anything from the cast speed amplification, but I think this point is worth it simply for this reduction here. If mana is a major issue, you can take these 2 points out and put them in here and get convert mana. Now, if you do this, you have to keep in mind that convert mana is going to take some of your HP and turn it into mana. So while it's going to keep you topped off really, really well, it will do damage to you. So having some HP absorb is recommended, or a good amount of HP regeneration. If you have one of those, then convert mana is basically covered, and it works phenomenally. It's really good. Now, if mana is just not an issue at all and you don't need either one of these, I would probably just take this element penetration. In our second tree, we're coming down here. A lot of this stuff doesn't really help us out because we're not a spell-based build, but we get this big 15% element damage amplification. Like, this is really, really good for a second specialization tree. That's a lot of damage. We'll also get sharpness. I come down here and I grab this right here, this 40% spell crit and crit damage. This is going to give a nice boost to our Thorn explosion. All right, and in Pirate, we are going to be grabbing this element damage amplification. We will be coming down here and grabbing this damage amp against debuffed enemies. We are going to have a chance to shock in this build. And then since we are adding 10% cold damage here, this node right here actually takes a portion of your damage and applies it as cold. So we're doing primarily lightning damage, but this will give us a portion as cold damage, which then allows us to do things like chill and freeze. So chill is a debuff, so we will get damage amplification if we chill the enemy. And then also this damage amplification against crowd controlled effects. We get that since we are lightning, we can apply bind. Bind basically just binds the enemy in place, but it acts as a crowd control. And since we have status effect rate, so we got +2 right here, that gives us a chance to not only bind, but then freeze with the cold damage as well. So that's how we will get that amplification there. So as we look at the Scarecrow here, we're going to attack it, and we're going to see, yes, we are getting shocks. There's bind. That's our crowd control we talked about. Chill, shock. Now, this is a low-level Scarecrow. As you start going against higher-level monsters, the damage that you do from cold damage is not going to apply chill and freeze quite as frequently, since the majority of the damage is not coming from it, but it could still happen. And one more thing, since Thorn Explosion hits like 4 times, and then your Spinning Dagger can hit and then come back, it hits multiple times as well. All those hits can trigger any of these statuses up here. Even though it's a lower percentage of chance that we can apply these statuses, we are hitting a lot more in this build, so the low percentages don't feel quite as bad. But as far as gear stats and dagger bases that you should be going for, charm stats and charm blessings and relic information, all of that is going to be outlined in the video description below. But how do you guys like the build? Is there anything that we can do to improve it? Let me know. Drop something in the comments. If you've got any questions, drop that there as well. But if the video has been helpful, do me a solid and give me a like and a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. But I've got to get back to the grind, so I'll catch you guys later.